bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, I hear myself. Fantastic sign. What's up, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook? We're watching Brunsey Entertainment. We have a lovely guest on the show today, Rae Panache. She's going to be going through some amazing stories today. She can tell us a little bit about herself. Rae, just 30 seconds. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm Rae Panache and I am a recovering alcoholic and substance misuser. I also have the diagnosis of bipolar. I'm very high functioning with it. Since I put the drink down, I ended up working within the recovery community, working within mental health. I got some grades and qualifications to be able to help me facilitate, do peer mentoring. And now I'm on the journey of getting my level 4 diploma in psychotherapy.
Wow, that was a mouthful. Okay, we're going to start right. That was a great insight. But what we're going to do, we're going to start right at the beginning. We're going to find out exactly who Rae Panache is and how she was. Tell us a little bit about you growing up as your childhood, family life. What was it? What was Rae Panache like back in them days?
Okay, so I'm the fourth oldest of 19 children. My father is a Jamaican black man and my mother is an English white woman. And when we grew up, I grew up a lot in hostels because my mum was subjected to a lot of domestic violence. So pretty much a lot of my childhood was moving around from city to city. I couldn't really form any kind of friends because I knew that there were going to be an end line to it. So there was no kind of, I was kind of disheartened with that. When I was growing up, I was living in a very white predominant area, Halifax, if anybody knows about Halifax. I'm born and bred in Sheffield. Sheffield's very diverse as well. But yeah, going back to Halifax where I was, it was very, like I said, it was a white environment and I was very much stood out, from the crowd. They also didn't know what race I was, so I'd get, hey, Pakistani, as your granny got her, does it, whatever, and then I'd get the N word, then I'd get the B word, and that's how I grew up. So I always knew that I was different in that sense. And then my mum came back to Sheffield. We moved to an area that was very diverse. We was on an estate now where there were numerous white women on there with mixed race kids. What I kind of noticed was the fathers weren't around. They were out there doing skirt meetings and producing more kids. Really sad. Also, with that, my mum being a white woman, she also had to deal with that pressure, of you're an N lover, so she had to deal with discrimination and prejudices herself just by having, mixed race kids. From that, I got kicked out at the age of 14. I was a wild teen looking for love in all the wrong places. I developed drinking as a coping tool to help ease some of the feelings that I was going through. I then ended up being pregnant at a very early age at 16 and had my baby. And then I realized that I was going to be a role model and I needed to sort myself out. I got back into education. I did a humanity and social studies access course that gained me entry into university to do my social work degree. I then pulled out because I was pregnant with my second child, and when I had my second child, that's when the drinking got out of control. My mental health started deteriorating even more. But I started showing mental health symptoms when I had my first child, and I had what they call baby blues, a depression, and then it turned into severe depression, then severe anxiety. So yeah, I've got a history with mental health.
Okay. That was a lot. Well, I'll try to skip back to when you was 14 and you got kicked out. What would you say that was drawing you away from, drawing you into sort of like this sort of wild lifestyle? Did you have what drew you that way?
Didn't have no guidance of either parents, to be fair. So I was out on my own 2 feet, and that is the reason my mum found it very difficult to ever show me or any of my other siblings love, and that is because she was adopted when she was born. So she had been dealing with issues within herself of rejection, and she kind of cut herself off. She had a baby before me. I would have had a white brother, but he passed away at 6 months, so she had cot death to deal with as well. As she's going on, she ended up meeting my father, a Jamaican guy, and then she had to endure some beatings, domestic violence, and then she ended up leaving three children later. She ended up getting in another relationship with another black man, and I'm not saying that, you know, all black men are like this. It's just a defect of that particular person. White people do it. Chinese people have domestic violence. Domestic violence is universal. It is not, you know, it doesn't discriminate.
Definitely.
So
Definitely
yeah, that's my reason.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So when did you first become, like, what would you say first drew you to this first drop of alcohol? Then that sort of led you down.
I would say I can remember myself downing a big bottle of Southern Comfort, and that's a big spirit count. And I was just on the side of the road, you know, just downing it and downing it and downing it. The way that I was drinking like a fish, it wasn't drinking, you know, like to enjoy it. It was drinking to, you know, get obliterated, because the reality that I was in, I was very upset. I was very angry. And yeah, I felt like that was the only thing that was comforting me at the time.
What would you say you was angry at that time? What was like?
I was probably angry at the fact that my parents didn't love me or show me any affection or made me feel like I was, you know, I always say I grew up with not with the normality of a mother-daughter relationship or a father-daughter relationship. So it probably stems from not having those fundamentals in place in the first place. Not that I want to blame them, because I then ended up blaming them for a bit, being a bit of a rebel, not understanding it, hating them, blaming them. And then I got to a point where I thought, you know what, this is when I was more in my recovery, I started thinking about their life and what it was like for them and what their upbringing was like. And I took a walk in their shoes to be able to empathize with them and forgive them, because being a parent is such a huge responsibility. It's one of the biggest responsibilities that you will ever get.
Okay, and it's definitely, like you said, it's definitely hard. It's definitely, in hindsight, you can look back at it, but to the young you growing up, I imagine, you know, it's very tough. And, you know, and also, well, I'm going to say this as well. It's like being like being like growing up with a white parent and a black parent, you know, being in between kind of, and not having a solid, like, it's so important. I say this all the time. I can't stress it. For especially black dads, it's so important. You have to stay in that child's life. If you're choosing to go with a white woman, and you cannot leave that woman and not look after that child, because your child is growing up lost. It's like, you know, I've got three young children myself, you know, and we're in a predominantly white area, you know, and if I left them and I wasn't able to sort of, like, you know, show them something, you need that. You need someone helping you. So I mean, honestly, it's a very lonely. I can only imagine what you've been through. You know, it's a very lonely. Like, you know, some of the things your dad should have been able to put his hand on you and say, "Don't worry about that." You know, it's this, it's that, and explain things to you, and also even defend you as well in ways. You know, so it's a very tough thing. It's so important now that I see these guys and they're just having babies with these girls, and then just leaving. And I'm just like, what are you doing? You can't do that. And then they wonder why we have all this knife crime issues and all this other stuff going on, because, you know, boys with girls, they might turn to, they normally, girls look for love, look for father figures. Boys look for gangs to join, you know. And once they've joined their wrong gang, you know, that's it, and they just, it's a downward spiral from there, you know. And it's so, I stress again, you know, you guys, especially black men out there, especially if white women is your thing, that's your thing, that's happy for you, good. But you make sure, no matter what happens, you're there for your child, because it's so important. They will need you. You know, like, you know, it's not the same. Like, you know, like even with the best intentions, I've seen white women try to bring up, like, mixed race children or whatever, and, you know, they just don't. And it's not their fault. They're not black. They don't know what it's like, you know. And, you know, it's just, you're, like you say, your mum walking down the road with 3 mixed race children and stuff like that. You know, your dad should have been there, sort of helping, you know, sort of thing, and supporting you guys. So I mean, like I said, it's very natural to look like, I can't, no one can really, tell us what that's like. Actually, I'm not even going to say, what was it like for you growing up, feeling like there's no one holding you down and feeling like everyone's looking at you, and what does that feel like?
I felt like an orphan. Okay, so I felt like an orphan, even though both of my parents are alive, but they're actually not active. Actually actively acting like parents. So obviously, when I became a parent, even I flopped because I was in active addiction. There was a point where I had to hand over my children, to actually focus on my recovery. My kids never got took off me or anything like that. So when I was fighting for them in court, it was for a residency order. But word on road was a little bit like, she's neglected the kids, she's a junkie, she's a criminal. Because with active addiction, I did go down the path of the criminal path. Like I said, my record of achievement stopped at one point, stopped getting grades, and I ended up embarking on getting a criminal record with convictions. So,
do you think there's anything that could be put in place for for like, I think it should be looked at. I think it's something that should be looked at. There should be something put in place for children that are in certain areas and that don't have a father figure to sort of help them. Do you think maybe there should be like a government sort of plan or something put in place to help that? Because it's something that you hear about it obviously on social media. Is why I sort of engaged with you, because obviously I saw people coming at you, different sorts of people coming at you, telling you you're not black and all this sort of stuff, and which was just baloney to me, and I don't get why black men feel they need to sort of dig out. It's always women as well. They always go for women, and it's like dig them out, for some reason. But I think maybe there's some sort of government sort of thing needs to be put in place to sort of to help a little bit, because it's something that needs to be looked at. Otherwise, you're just going to have this same cycle over and over again. I mean, it's getting better now, where there's more sort of culture in most places now, sort of, and there are people, but there's nothing the same as a parent, but nothing like a parent to hold someone down and say, this is this and that is that. Have you ever been able to speak to your dad about like what was going on?
I'm very truthful with my dad. I'm very honest, so I do put it to him, and he doesn't like that, so me and my father don't really have a solid relationship because I'm always bringing facts to him. He took me to Jamaica and he beat me in Jamaica, and he started talking to me about, you're not allowed in my country, I'm not allowed anywhere then, I suppose. Do you know what I mean? TikTok's classified me as a white man by now. You know what I mean? So I'm not black, I'm not female, so I must be a white man, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that's a shame. That's a shame, because it's me sitting there. When I talk, I'm talking from like a father's perspective, someone that's there for their children, and some people don't have that, and they don't have that maternal instinct towards children, and they just don't see it. They prefer to sort of just brush it off or whatever, But I mean, and obviously, denial is obviously a way of, denial and like sort of short, selective memory loss. It's a way of like coping. Like you can't think, oh shit, I've neglected my children for a very long time and I've left them to go through all this.
I think it's also hard for someone who hasn't been there. It's like when I look at my father in his eyes, and I always felt this from being young, I felt like I was always staring at a stranger, someone who lacks empathy, someone who lacks understanding. It wasn't even my father that taught me about my black culture. I went into school to learn about this. I went to lectures. I watched African professors and lecturers. I would attend conferences. And I did all this because whilst I was, again, in my recovery, a lot of solitude, a lot of trying to understand who I am, and my race came up. I had to look at my mum. I had to look at the white side, how the British Empire was built. I had to look at my black side, the transatlantic slave trade and the suppression and the oppression that they've gone through. I very much know that I have to take on board both cultures. Yeah, I am appalled, with the British, culture and how it is and what they've done, and there's bloodshed. There's been no reparation. People talk about the slave masters, the slave masters got paid off. Reparation never got no people ever got paid. No 40 acres, no blood clot mule. You know what that is? That's billions to this day. That's billions of pounds. England can't even pay for that. But now I'm getting into something else because you're going to start making me talk about the Queen and the jewels on her head.
We'll stay away from that.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, addiction and addiction. Let's talk about a little bit about addiction and just explain to people what active addiction and what was the other one? I'm not too familiar. What was it? I think you said
active addiction and active recovery. So I'm in active recovery, and recovery is all good because recovery, you get a lot of testimonials, you get a lot of, people reuniting with their family, getting back out there, understanding themselves, and it's all good. Then I talk a lot about active addiction because active addiction is where a lot of people still are. And with that, you mentioned the denial. Now that is huge because they do go through this. It's not me. Everybody else is doing it. I'm not an addict. I'm not. I deal with a lot of people that are like that. Family, friends, colleagues, people I've worked with. So it's very hard to deal with someone who is in that denial bit. But I always say there's a thin line between a habit and an addiction. And also, taking recreational drugs, just at the weekend, it can then start establishing itself and becoming a permanent thing in your life where now you are an addict and then you have to deal with that. So yeah, I do like to tend to talk more about the active addiction because I know that that's where a lot of people are. Recovery, sometimes people will relapse. They can. I remember I did a year and a half, and then I relapsed, and I went straight back into all the problems and dilemmas, such as antisocial behaviour. Housing's coming out, because of loud music, getting locked up, drunken disorderlies, public nuisance. Waking up in cells all the time. So it just kind of happens rapidly and really quickly.
So you said active addiction. That's obviously something you like to talk about. When you say active addiction, what first thing that springs to mind to me is what's the word? Functioning alcoholics. So people that need a drink every day, that have a drink every day, whether let's say they need it, they drink every day no matter what. But they're able to work and still able to sort of, it's not affecting their life like dramatically. They're just able to have like a glass of wine. Like, nowadays most women are a bottle of wine at least 3 or 4 nights a week sort of thing, So what would you class them? Would you class them as like, because there's a thin line. I've seen some people and I'm just like, you're drinking a lot, and it's always something going on over there, It's like, it's either drugs or start drinking, and I'm like, you might have a problem over there. Like, when does it become a problem? Because obviously there's functioning alcoholics, functioning drug users and everything. But when does it? How does it get to the point where they're like, where you can make someone I don't think you can make someone understand it. It's sort of denial what we said.
Mm-hmm.
But, how would you identify it, sort of thing? The fact that someone that needs a drink every night.
Well, I would say I was a functioning alcoholic and substance misuser. So I was able to keep my home, fix the board, sort the kids out, get them to school. There was no kind of problems around how I was operating. I was still being a youth worker. So when it's like that, that's when you are in denial because you're like, what is it? I'm functioning. Everything's being attended to. For me, it got problematic when I was waking up in police cells. My personality started changing. In my book, I talk about a alter ego called Raquel. I didn't even call her Raquel. People said Raquel because my name is Rachel. So they just kind of said, oh, Raquel's here. Do you know what I mean? And then I just slowly started noticing people had start coming away from me, like when I was drinking more, I was very switchy. I always call it a Dr. Jekyll and a Dr. Jekyll and Hyde syndrome. That's why I call the book Dr. Jekyll and Madame Rosé, because I do believe that once you drink something that's a mind altering substance, this then changes the dynamics of who you are. I would go deeper into it, but we might have to leave that for a later date because that's like more about spirituality. So I always feel like there's a when you talk about spirits and actual alcohol being called the spirits, did a lot of research into this, and there is a star called the agul. It's an Arabic word, and it's about a body-eating entity. And I feel like, and I speak about this in my book, like I was possessed at certain times. I'd have a blackout. Now, when scientifically they say when you're having a blackout, you have overdosed on alcohol, basically. But for me, I feel like it's something much deeper, something much more sinister that we don't have an awareness about. So I call them walk-ins, and they seem to take my body for a joyride. I wake up after this joyride's happened and I have no recollection, and I'm like, oh my god, what have I done? I have to go back now and find out what I've done. can give you an example of that. I went to a friend's house. Everything was nice. Everything was kosher. Well, I thought. I've woke up in my own bed and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, I weren't here. I was at my friend's. Let me go back and backtrack because I can't remember anything. I've knocked on the door. She's got a big bruise on her arm. So I've said, OMG, he's not done that to you. I've walked in like I am because it's my friend and I've gone in and put the kettle on. She's obviously thinking, what's going on? She said, Rachel, you did this. I said, what? She said, you did it. She went, you started acting up, which needed to get you out the house. You were acting violent. I couldn't even remember. I could only apologise to her because I was sober at that point. You know, I just woke up and went to the house to find out.
Sorry, so you weren't drinking or anything during this episode? You weren't drinking or taking drugs or anything?
No, I was. But when I woke up, the first thing I've done after the session is, let me go back, because I've had a blackout. You know what, let me go see, check on my girl that will relax and see if she's all right. You know what I'm saying? When I've gone, girl's got a big bruise on her face, and I'm thinking it's her man that's done it. She's telling me, no, it was you, and me and my man had to get you out of my house.
Wow. You mentioned, there's a lot into that, you know, because it's like, you know, it's like when we go out, like I'm not a heavy drinker, but I have obviously had a few heavy sessions, and there's that thing where that the morning after a night out where you wake up and you don't want to remember, but you kind of do remember pictures. You kind of do remember pictures of what happened, you know, and obviously if those pictures aren't great and don't hold you in the best of light, it's quite easy to see. I don't like, for me, like I call it the cringes. I wake up with the cringes like from the night before. I'm like, I didn't say that, did I? I'm like, no. But anyway, we'll skim over that. You mentioned your book. Let's have a look at that bad boy, and I'll put it in the link, and just tell us what led you to write this book. And it's on Amazon store, guys. It's in the chat now. Yeah.
So I'll just read what's on the back. These are not only the memoirs of a woman who battled with her alcoholism, but also those of a woman who battled with her own conscience and demons. A woman torn between two personalities, one being good, kind, caring, and loving, and the other being crazy, wild, and aggressive. There's almost a Jekyll and Hyde scenario going on within these memoirs, combined with a mental health disorder called bipolar. I also start it with a small biography about who I am, where I come from, so you can get that understanding as well. I then talk about, you know, when I'm 14, because usually that's the age where people are exploring themselves and their reality and their environment. I go into, you know, memory lane, the devil's juice, rose-tinted spectacle. So there's loads of different stuff, and then I end with some poems in the end.
What would you say is your most, like, what is your proudest moment from that book? Like a page or a chapter or whatever.
Just writing it because it's self-inventory. Now, I never did the 12 steps AA, and there was very much divine intervention when it came to giving up the drink, giving up the spirits. I had to surrender myself to a higher power. Now, this is something that I was doing myself without no groups, without anything. It was something I was trying to understand. I was in my own head. I was in my own house, and I didn't have my children around me, like I said, because at that point I was fighting in court for them. So I had a lot of time to, you know, think about things.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that self-healing process then, because that's very interesting. Let's talk about what. So you said you didn't do the 12 steps. So you're in your house, almost like would you say I don't know. It's almost like praying, really, isn't it? When you're sort of like saying, you tell us exactly what you were doing.
What I was doing was praying and fasting. And to be fair, before but I did do smart facilitation. There's this thing called smart facilitation where it's the same kind of setup. You sat in a group, but it's more kind of practical. They don't go on about, you know, a higher power. They talk about, you know, choices that you make and certain mechanisms and methods that you can use, you know, to keep yourself in your recovery. I used that. So I used to go and I used to sit in the circle and I'd be like, hi, my name's Rae and I'm an alcoholic and this is how my week's been, yada, yada, yada. But then when I had that relapse, and then I decided then, when I had that relapse, I need to go back into recovery. But I did that recovery on my own because I already knew the smart facilitation and I already knew the program. So I just used the program all over again, what I already knew. Now, how I found out I'd already done the 12 steps was when I attended a CA, a cocaine anonymous. There was a guy who was trying to get ethnic people, black people, Asians into recovery. It's very hard. Now, when I was in recovery, when I was back in SAS, I couldn't see any representation of myself. I was just surrounded by white people. They were coming forward, getting the help, but very rare to see a black face or a mixed race face or an Asian face. And I know for a fact these people have been doing the same thing, you know, because I was out in the clubs drinking with them to them extents and doing drugs with them to them extents. Now, is there a cultural barrier? There must be, you know, like shame on the family, you know, we don't need that kind of stigma around it. We've got enough stigma already, type thing. I don't know, but I still persisted with it. But I noticed a lot of people who came in didn't feel comfortable and would back out. So anyway, this guy was in Pittsmore, which is an area in Sheffield that's very, you know, diverse. So he's set it up there. I've come down, I've explained my story, talked him through it. My guy's going step 1, step 2, step 3, all the way to step 12. And I'm like, well, how did I do all the steps when I've not been to AA? He said, just through your story, I know exactly where you are. Do you know what I mean? You've covered the whole of the, down to the self-inventory was me writing the book, you know, on my own. Well, I didn't write the book on my own. I actually was with a team called Crisis, because I had a stint of homelessness. So it was them that I worked and workshopped this with. So I had a tutor, and there was another two students that were in there, and that's what made this possible, because I was able to workshop chapter by chapter with a proper English literature tutor. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to touch a little bit on you, and obviously your message, any advice that you would give to maybe someone that's growing up that's maybe mixed race or something, and they're in an area where it's just them and the black postman or the black it's the black bus driver or whatever it is. What advice would you give someone, you know, just to sort of like, you know, maybe, I don't know, just to feel like comfort in words? What advice would you give them? Like, obviously, seek knowledge. Knowledge is always the key sort of thing.
Definitely.
But what would you say? Because you know where you were, you know what you were going through, you know what triggered you, you know how you were feeling, and there's going to be so many other little girls and boys in areas. Unfortunately, dads have peed off, and mums. There's mums as well doing it nowadays. So we won't just jump on the dads. But what would you say to those kids, maybe 14 years old, feeling like, you know, they might go and seek something, you know, like what you were seeking basically at 14, to sort of steer them in the right path? What would you say to them?
Well, what I would say is that we need to be comfortable in our own skin. I would say that, like you said, the knowledge, get knowledge around it. Look at your culture, look at your history as well. When it comes to society and people, try not to take on board their insults or what they have to say, because it's only an opinion, and that doesn't mean to say it has to destroy your psyche or anything like that, because it can be very soul destroying. I remember my mum saying to me one time, I was in the bath trying to rub off my skin because of being in such a dominant white area that people were telling me, you know, like I'm black, I'm a Pakistani, but saying it in the most horriblest ways, and it just made me feel like, Mum, why am I not like you? You know, but I never felt like when I seen a black person, I'm not even like them. You know, like if I saw my dad or my stepdad, because there was always a black figure in the house, you know, and I could always like kind of, I think that's why I don't understand racism, because I do believe it's just human race, you know. Hue is an array of shades and tones, HUE, that makes us human. Yes, we have all different traditions and cultures. I mean, I love cooking dal. I love cooking Asian cuisines. I love cooking Chinese cuisine. So that means I have to go and find out what kind of spices that they use to be able to create that dish, you know. And it's a beautiful world that we're living in with loads of diversity, and being mixed race shouldn't. I know it sometimes feel that we're not accepted from both sides, but that's from the individual, that a particular individual from that group. It's not the whole group, you know, because I've noticed, even from the TikToks, I realized that it was a very small percentage that was going at me saying, "Oh, you're not black, you're not black, you're not black." And there was a very small percentage that were saying, you know, you're more white, you're more white. And to be fair, it's like, it doesn't matter what anybody has to say about you. It's about what most important is what you feel about yourself. And what I would say to my younger self, or anyone who's out there is suffering and feeling as though they don't fit in, you know, maybe it's about sometimes removing yourself from certain groups, but then it's hard, you know, if you're already living in that community.
It's hard. It's very hard, and you know, it's like some parents aren't equipped. It's not their fault. They're not equipped to deal with these problems. You know, they're not
Mhm.
equipped to deal with them, so they can look for help from their parents, and you know, I think, you know, but you know, it's a real tough one. And on this note, guys, as well, I'm literally just putting a link in the chats now. If anyone does want to pop in, and I will bring their voice in only. And if you have any questions, you can come in and ask a question. But no worries if you're just enjoying the show. And this will be uploaded as a video separately as well. But yeah, I'm just posting that in the link now, guys. So that link, you just click on it. I'm only going to bring your voice in, not going to bring your camera in, and we'll just have a little chat about it. But yeah, and you touched on something very important as well. Scrubbing your skin, and this is something very important, and I've experienced this myself as well. I've seen it. I don't know if everyone knows this or not. On your joints are always darker. Your joints are always darker. Your elbows, your knees, mainly your elbows and knees, are always darker than other parts of your skin. So I mean, and when you're doing this, when you're as a white person, if you're doing this to your mixed race children, scrubbing them, saying, oh, you're some of the words I've heard most of the time, they say, look, your skin's black. It's so dirty. They don't even tend to say dirty. They say it's black. And
I've heard that though, dirty, you dirty, because that's what I got called, you know, like in school, you dirty, because it's...
That is psychologically damaging to say to someone. Like that's of any color. Like you're black. Look at you. I'm trying to scrub the black off you. You know, no. I prefer, if you've got dirt on you and you clean yourself, fine. But you know, black people, most people of color, their joints are going to be slightly darker than any parts of their body, and probably white people as well. But just obviously they got lighter skin, so it's not going to tell. And some of our lighter skinned people, some of our white people, they haven't experienced the joys of moisturizer, you know, at the minute, which is haven't experienced it yet. You know, it's like moisturizer. I'm not dry. I don't have dry skin. Why are you so shiny for? Like I'm shiny today. I'll put like slap a little bit on, but you know, moisturizer, it's so important. And obviously there's a difference between when you see people when they get to like 60, 70, most black people, you know, we've been moisturizing our whole life, you know, and you know, there's a big difference when you see the people, but you know.
Also, I'd like to mention the fact that mixed race children do get these thing called blue Mongolian blue spots. I'll tell you a little story about a friend who came. So I had a friend, a white friend who came. She changed my baby's bum, and as she changed my baby's bum, she went, "Oh, you." I went, "What do you mean you can't believe me?" She went, "You've slapped him, and he's got a big bruise on his bum." And I had to then, you know, like school her and say, "No, it's because of the mixed blood why he's got this blue Mongolian blue spot," you know, and for you to look it up. But back in the 80s when I was born, obviously the same stuff was represented on my body. And the health visit at the time presumed that either my mum or my dad was beating me, you know, so they are very uneducated or lack knowledge when it came to these kind of things that were displayed on the bodies.
Yeah, definitely. There's loads of stories like that. I think, to be fair, a lot of the nurses, obviously my partner, she's half white, half Asian. A lot of the nurses, they would come to us and say to us before we had our first child, you know, about obviously the possibility of a blue spot sort of thing, and they obviously, you know, but yeah, they did mention that a lot of people have actually been like seeing it and thought, oh, someone's done, like social services used to see that and think, oh, someone's been beating the child, and then obviously the whole thing came out. So it's actually quite well known now, I would say.
Yeah.
But what's quite interesting to me though is like nowadays, like you were saying, younger people saying racial slurs to you and stuff in the areas that you were in, sort of, you know, like that don't happen. So like in them sort of country areas, Halifax, maybe Liverpool, certain areas, certain small country areas. But that, I mean, nowadays in London, I mean, you're not going to get away with something like that. You're like, you know, women walking down the road with their mixed race children or whatever, or black children, whatever, you know, they're not, you might get the odd stare. A lot of people get the snobby snare and stuff like that, but not many people are brave enough. Like, English racism has changed now. It's all on text. People prefer to go on Twitter, you know, or they hide behind these really extreme views with loads of stats. That's when I call them the intellectual racists. Like, those people, the intellectual racists, those are the people that feel strongly about everything. And, you know, they'll be on there typing, they're well thought out, typing away, you know, rather than they're so angry. You see these people, they're so angry because nowadays you can't say nothing. No one can say nothing. Like,
it's too sensitive. We're living in a very sensitive. It's like when someone said to me, "Oh, you identify as." I went, "No, I don't identify. I am." There's a difference. I know, because of the generation that we're living in, people are identifying as a frigging microwave and a toaster and a lamppost. Do you know what I mean? So I am not identifying. I know what I am. Do you know what I mean? All right, let's take the colorism, because basically that were colorism. That were being colorist. Do you know what I mean? You can get a black person that looks very, very light. You can get a mixed race person that looks very dark or very light. You know,
a black albino, a lot of people see them, they don't know. You wouldn't, like, they don't know. I don't know if you ever watched Big Brother, when I can't remember that brother's name, the albino guy that was in there. And that was during the racial divide in the house in Big Brother. And one of the white girls said to him, "You're not black, are you?" And they were like, "Yes, he's black." And it was like one of those, was weird. It was like, it was just very weird to sort of see. But yeah, it's crazy when people just see the color sort of thing. And, you know, you do get you get it all, you know, but ultimately we're all human beings, as you said, you know. But, you know, people just want to, obviously, as well, it's also upbringing as well, you know. You think to yourself, how does it keep rolling over, all this racism and stuff like that, all this hatred in people's hearts? It rolls over because their parents bloody teach them it, you know. That's what happens.
Definitely.
Their parents teach them it. I mean, there's probably a small minority of children or anyone that might have a bad experience with a black person, with a white person, and think, "Oh, they're all like that," sort of thing. Like, especially if it's like a traumatic thing, like, you know, like one of the cliches I think back in the day was, "Oh, my cousin was raped by a black person, that's why I don't like black people," or something like that, you know. And that was one of the cliches. But like, what would happen if it was a white person that raped her? Then, you know, which is more likely to happen, to be fair. So, you know, you're gonna hate every white person, sort of thing. And it's just like I think it's just people just battle with the sort of, you know, how they're upbringing, you know, and all the rest of it. But we're heading towards the end of the show. We are 40 minutes in. It's been lovely having you on. So this is where we just fire a couple of questions at each other. Anything you want to ask me, I'll ask you loads of questions. So maybe, I don't know, maybe you got any questions or anything you want to put out there, any sort of, you know, but the show's yours now. For the last 5 minutes, the show is yours. Ask me any questions.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just give you a short. Well, I'd like to read you a poem. Actually,
I actually wanted you to do this, and we're going to end on this note. You're going to read your poem, and again, guys, the link is in the description, in the chat. If you want to buy the book, just click on the link. It'll take you to Amazon, and you can buy the book. Just tell us what the book's called again, please, if you don't mind.
It's called Dr. Jekyll and Madame Rosé. So this poem is called Standard Procedure, and it's about my alcoholism. This is a cautionary tale of a boozy female, addicted to drink and banged up in jail. A mind so depressed there's no winning, just fail. A mind so tormented, just wanting to bail. The art of duality combines our reality. For me, my drinking versus my morality. I question my loss, the loss of my sanity. My standards are slipping, how profound the profanity. And so it begins. With each and every accustomed sip, innocence ferments and takes a slip. A taste so sweet upon one's lips. The aftermath is hit or miss. Will it be crisis or will it be bliss? A dangerous game, surreal and insane. Let's take that trip down memory lane. Drinking and joking, laughing and smoking, binging so much my liver is soaking. Soaked up with spirits, feel off my tits. It's balmy, it's crazy. It kind of feels like bliss. But then, without warning, something alarming. I developed addiction so far from charming. My prince was a toad, my partner in crime. Our relationship crazy, it was one of a kind. My love for the drink, well, they say love is blind. Arrested and charged, drunk and disorderly. Family are worried, behaviour's extraordinary. Detained and convicted, the whole thing repeater. A regular, daily, standard procedure. Whether I was under arrest or under the thumb, there was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. A little lost girl just wanting her mum. Distorted a tangle and going adrift, this boozy female trapped in a mist, in need of some help, can someone assist? My cries are so weak, go unnoticed, go missed. They stand and stare, go up and glare. I pay no mind as they don't care. I just wait for old wounds to tear. Self-destruction, a soul's worst nightmare. Bright lights, delights, unknown insights, 24/7 in front of your eyes. Delirious feelings hard to describe. You can see it in my weary eyes. The self-deceit I realize. The alcoholic and her lies. Pain and torture hidden inside. Am I a master of disguise? Deep inside I truly despise. And that's the reckoning I recognize.
Wow, quite beautiful. I must say, you are a very beautiful reader and a fantastic person. It's been lovely listening to you and, hearing your stories. And obviously, as well, I hope to get you more on the show as well. Maybe we'll do some group stuff and help some people out, give some advice and stuff like that. But like I said, amazing having you on. And, I'm definitely going to buy your book as well. Anyone, the link will be in the description. You can buy her book, some amazing poetry, some amazing life stories. Rae Panache, I'm going to leave the last words with you.
And it's Rae Panache because the man them have the swagger and the girl them have panache. So love, light and blessings. And if you can't see the good in the world, you just be it.
Be the good in the world. People, fantastic. The full interview is on YouTube, guys. You can go and watch it there. Brudsy Entertainment, Rae Panache. It's recovering where you are on TikTok. What is it?
Yeah, on TikTok and on Facebook. It's Recovery with Rae. So we have a Facebook page and TikTok presence as well.
Okay, fantastic. Like I said, it was lovely having you on. Everyone, the full interview on YouTube, Brudsy Entertainment. Everyone have a fabulous day. Peace.
Peace out.
And that is